Hello, everybody, and welcome to this session of Fed Resources, three must-ask questions for federal employees before retiring. My name is Jeff Roediger. I'm founder, managing partner, and CEO of Fed Resource. We were founded in 2008 here in San Diego, California. At that time, we began doing retirement and benefit education sessions for the Department of Defense, as well as Customs Border Patrol. And since then, over the last 11 years, we've now worked in all 50 states and have partnered with some tremendous financial planners, one I'm going to introduce to you in a minute, and have really, we feel, had an impact positively in the lives of federal employees in regards to the financial decisions that they're making throughout their career. You can follow me on LinkedIn right here. Love to have you join my network of followers. We focus on issues surrounding public employees, and there's a lot of good content on there, and we try to make it as interactive as possible. I'm going to give you a little disclosure background before I introduce our guest. Fed Resource and our affiliate Fed Resource Benefits Network is not affiliated, endorsed, or sponsored by any federal government or U.S. agency at any level for this event. We have been very fortunate over the course of the last 11 years to have contracts specifically with federal agencies to conduct educational events, seminars, literacy, financial literacy sessions. And if you're joining us from HR or benefit officer, we'd love the opportunity to talk to you about that. But for this event, this is not sponsored by any government agency. So I want to make that clear. Now, as we do these events, it's very important for us to have experts on the financial planning front, because you can't have education on benefits and retirement without having resources that can help you solve problems. And we think we have a really good one. Bryan McCloskey is a great financial planner, and we're very honored to be affiliated with him. And he's going to give us some great feedback today as we go through some of these questions and provide a financial planning perspective on your benefits. So welcome, Bryan. Thanks for joining us.
Jeff, thank you so much. And I appreciate the introduction. And to everyone who's watching right now, hello, everybody. Certainly have appreciate the relationship that you and I have built, because we continue to reach out and educate and open the eyes of federal and government employees across the country. You know, I have my little space over here around Philadelphia, but you've helped me and a lot of other excellent colleagues of mine, really change folks' lives by helping them understand their benefits, really helping them do some good planning for themselves and their family. So I'm just really excited for everyone who's on the call today, and appreciate you having me on and the work that we've done together.
So tell the audience how you how you got involved in working with federal employees. How did that evolve? I don't think I've ever asked you that.
Yeah, well, I got buried in all the other good stuff we talk about, right? So, I've been in the business, in the advisory business, planning business for 10 years. I got in right after the crash. What timing, right? Which actually, so it shows a little bit of my naivety, because I'm an educator at heart, technically a retired educator from the state of Pennsylvania. And I moved in this direction because of some interest that I had in some of the good responsible nature I had and the good budgeting and the good number crunching I had. And I moved in this direction, but I certainly was headed this way right when that crash happened. And back then I quite didn't fully understand what was going on. We were all taught that, our 403B, and for federal employees, our TSP was just supposed to continue to increase, and we were all relying on our pensions. Right. And then the bottom just fell out. We're going to talk about that a little bit later today, I know, but it's fascinating. So getting into this space and then really looking at, working with folks who were retiring from the education system, who, my dad was actually worked for the government So, you know, in working with him and as he went through dealing with OPM and kind of handling his pension, you know, I really had my eyes open, and it just naturally drew me towards, you know, folks who are public servants. You know, they dedicate their careers, which doesn't always happen in the private sector, but they dedicate their careers to their job, and they're offered these really incredible benefits and offered some opportunity to do some good things around those benefits, but they're not always given the right the education or the knowledge to really know how to make the most of those. So I really found a space, just like a lot of our other colleagues have, to fill that gap and to educate people. So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun what we do.
Well, it's a good team. So, you know, we educate, we try to provide as much information and resources to each of you out there, and then to have planners that specialize makes it a complete cycle for us. And I think that's very important. You can't have one without the other. So before we get into the content, could you, we got to get through the legalese, right?
The legal stuff, which is perfectly fine. You know, like you mentioned before, you know, neither you or I are employees of the government. We're sponsored directly by, and we're not a government agency. You're sponsored directly by the government. And, you know, because I work in that personal financial planning space, you know, there's investment conversations and other conversations around taxes and whatnot. And most importantly, you just want to say, as the folks who are attending can read through disclosures, you know, we're not here today to promote or sell anything. We're just, you know, raising the educational understanding and providing a resource if someone wants to reach out and start to learn more, wrap their head around some of these concepts.
Right. Okay, so let's get into it.
Sure.
I always start with our mission as a company, and this has been the same since 2008. Our mission is to educate government employees on their three-tiered retirement by assessing their current situation and helping guide each of you through the coordination of your benefits and prioritizing your retirement goals and objectives, all the while minimizing risk to achieve financial security and freedom. I think that's what we all want.
For sure.
And it's a bumpy road at times, as you're going to see here, but I think education and a plan is where you need to be. So let's talk about what we're going to cover here today. Number one, how proposed changes could impact your pension retirement income, and what steps each of you need to take to offset these reductions in benefits if in fact they occur. Education is power. Number two, your TSP. Changes are occurring as we speak. And whether or not you're taking too much risk in your allocation, because the TSP is going to become more and more important to each of you. And then number three, who do you get your retirement advice from? This is very important, and you know, Brian's on here for a reason, and we're going to talk about some potential problems out there if you're not getting the right advice from the right.
Well, you have a story. I was going to say, Jeff, you have a story that you'll share closer to the end of this webinar, specifically about making sure you dig deeper into, you know, who it is that you're actually working with, right?
Yeah, the term financial advisor is way too general in the world we're in. So we're going to talk about that. So these are the three, and you know, frequently asked questions we get as a company. These are the areas that we really, really spend most of our time on, and we want to help educate each of you. So let's get into it. So why are the benefits changing? Well, you know, here's the bottom line. Economically, the country is in a ton of debt. I think we all know that. I'm not here to be a fear monger. I'm just here to, you know, speak to the truth of what's going on. $22 trillion in debt. That's incredible.
It's incredible. I'll add something right here, Jeff, if that's okay.
Yes.
This is not just happening at the federal level. Like a lot of our clients don't, you know, fully understand or dig into the pension numbers like you and I do and our colleagues do.
Yeah.
But all pensions are having a very difficult time right now,
Right.
and especially the federal government pension, and more importantly, you know, Any one of us can go to that website that's right in front of you right now and just watch these numbers climb.
Yep.
It's pretty scary. So I just wanted
Yeah,
to add.
right. We're not here, we're here to present facts and to help alert each of you to say, hey, I need to be aware of what I have and where I'm going. If you put your head in the sand, it doesn't help because these issues aren't going away. And our politicians, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, they keep kicking the can down the road, and this is why we're here. Let's face the
Yep.
facts. But we're
Yep.
here to say, hey, there's some planning that can be done to minimize this if you're prepared, and that's
To
that is
minimize the impact of the negative changes, right? If you're prepared. That's
exactly.
exactly right.
And so I know each of you have heard. The White House is proposing changes again. This is from Federal News Network. They're looking at reducing or eliminating the cost of living for existing and future retirees. They want to move from a high 3 calculation on your pension to a high 5. And Brian's going to talk a little bit here in a few minutes on the impact of modifying the G fund and what that could have in your TSP. So these are changes that you need to be aware of because if they do come to fruition and you're caught off guard, you may not be in a position where you can do anything about it. And so let's
Certainly.
address how the proposed pension changes are going to impact your retirement income. I will point out that economists have said the federal pension for new retirees will be based on an average 5. Now, a lot of people look at that and say that doesn't really mean anything to me, but economists have said that's an estimated reduction on your annuity income at retirement by 2% a year. So that could have some impact. And I know, Brian, before we started the presentation today, you had some really interesting feedback on these potential changes and what that would mean to a federal employee. Would you expand on that?
Yeah, well, we were talking, I mean, first of all, the point you made about just the change in the equation a little bit, that can lower the starting pension number, and they can make those changes, depending on where you are in your career. So again, if anything, everything we're talking about right here, because of the challenges challenges economically that the government's facing, it effectively reduces the value or reduces the positive impact of our pension when it comes time to start drawing income from it. And then once you start drawing income from it, what's really fascinating, and I've talked to clients about this, for the last 30 years we've been working, we almost expect a raise every single year. Right, Jeff? It's like, and
Yep.
when you get the raise, you're like, okay, great. Maybe you're happy with the raise, maybe you're upset with the amount of the raise, whatever. But you almost
It's
expect a raise.
expected. It's
It's
expected.
expected, right? And some of us have spouses that are in private industry, and sometimes they're mad when they don't get a raise in a given year. And what's really interesting is that once you step into retirement and you go through that process of starting to have your checks come from your pension and Social Security as opposed to your active day-to-day work, you've been conditioned to expect raises. And the challenge is we may not see those same raises through the next 20, 30 years of these
Exactly.
pension payouts. And they'll either be lower raises and you'll be upset, or there'll be no raises and you'll be very, very upset. So that's where we get into the planning around the pension, knowing that this challenge is potentially facing us becomes even more important, because there's some things you can do, and the folks that are listening to this, there's some things we can talk about that you can do where you can build in raises for yourself as your retirement moves forward. Because we want to keep you happy. You don't want to be mad, right?
No. And you bring up a good point. I will also share with everybody that at the end of the presentation today, if you want more information on anything that we've covered, there's going to be a brief survey. So I know some people have responded to me saying, hey, I was taking notes, and could you repeat that, or could you send me the PDF? And absolutely, we can send you the slides. But you also have an opportunity to receive a pension assessment with Brian's firm, and you can ask questions and comments. So at the end, there will be a brief survey that you can put information in and get feedback or get help if that's where you're at. So one of those is understanding your pension. We believe that a holistic view of not only your pension payout, your FERS or SERS, even if you're law enforcement or retiring before 62, the supplement, what's that going to look like right now? What could it look like with potential changes? And what are my options at different ages? So I think you need to have an assessment done. You might be able to do it through your agency. We're a little biased. We think that the assessment that we can provide is a little more detailed, and then we'll combine your TSP and Social Security and even your spouse's information if you want to see a starting point of where you sit right now and what it's going to look like. So
Jeff, that's it right there.
understanding your pension is important. Go ahead.
Yeah, and
Brian.
you even added that. You even added a major point there. It's like looking at the whole household and how the pension works with the other things around it. Whether your spouse has a pension, your spouse has a 401k, or you guys are just saving in general. Just tying those things together is not something that we can get from the pension report from the government, right?
No.
And I've had a lot of clients actually obtain their pension estimates from OPM, and then they just basically bring it over, and then we do the more detailed analysis. So whatever works for folks on the phone. But when we're a couple years, close to that date, when you're approaching that date where you might actually start to think about pulling the ripcord and retiring, these are the types of numbers that allow for that confidence. So you got
Well, when you submit that application to OPM, I mean, that's it,
That's right.
So you made your decision. And I can't tell you how many times I've talked to retirees that said, wow, I wish I would have known then what I know now. And this is
Jeff,
what we do.
One of the reasons why I'm passionate about this is when I was formally retiring as an educator, I saw folks in the room who were making their pension elections, asking questions of the person who was presenting that day, who is not a financial planner and that does not know their personal situation. I was fascinated by the fact that folks were not prepared on the day that they were signing the paperwork. It's almost my mission now.
I hear that all the time. I do. And that's why we're trying to get the word out. So everybody that's attending, share this with others that maybe haven't attended, simply because we're here to help. We really are.
Yep.
And agencies are making cuts. You don't know when there's going to be a reduction in force in your agency. So it goes right to what you were saying, Brian, about you need to be prepared, because what if there's a reduction in force? The Department of Interior and EPA have gone through a reduction in force recently. Social Security Administration seems like they're always going through some kind of phased retirement.
Yep.
The military absolutely revamped their entire retirement system. And, that was kind of, eye-opening to a lot of military personnel that were like, okay, now I got to really figure out, do I stay in the pension? Do I go in the blended system? So the writing's on the wall that changes are coming. And so you need to be prepared. And that leads us to the second question. And are you taking too much risk in your TSP with everything we just talked about? We get the questions, how do I withdraw my money? What if I die with money in the account? How can I withdraw without incurring distribution penalty? Forced distributions with required minimum distributions, RMD, that nasty acronym. But, really, again, Brian, what are you seeing the biggest risk being in the TSP and the Fed clients you work with? What are some of the mistakes? And could you educate the audience on what they need to be aware of when dealing with the TSP?
Sure. I mean, look at the list of questions is pretty long when it comes to the risks inside the TSP. I mean, you hit a couple of them right there in terms of how to access money, but then knowing that the TSP is a purely investment account. It's meant to supplement the pension and retirement. So there's certainly, market volatility risks. There's certainly there's actually, until the Modernization Act, which I know we're going to talk about here in a little bit, which we're looking forward to. But there's liquidity concerns about how you can get money out of the TSP, which hopefully which is on the docket to change. But then there's, on the back end, we don't have the crystal ball, so there's longevity risk. We don't know how long we're going to last, and be around. So how long does that money last? And not when most folks don't fully understand the funds that you have in front of you right now. They don't fully understand how each of the individual funds work and what they're invested in, how volatile they are. When they don't understand how the L funds work, they can be invested completely opposite of what they think.
Right.
It's challenging. That's where you're going to get into the risk number a little bit, which can be really helpful. But this is such a very important account to have next to the pension, that knowing the ins and outs of everything we're listing here is just, we want to empower folks to take that responsibility to know the answers to these questions. How are they invested? How exposed
exactly. And you get it's more to this than, okay, so one of the questions I get a lot, and I'm sure you do too, is, well, should I leave my money in the TSP or move it into an IRA? The TSP is so inexpensive. Well, let me tell you, one reason the TSP is so inexpensive is because there's not a lot of options.
That's a great point.
So let's not, look, I saw a study a few years ago that it actually is from the TSP investment board, that 50% of retirees will move some or all their money out of the TSP into an individual IRA for liquidity purposes, etc. The other half will leave it there. We're not saying one is, what side of the fence are you on? We don't know. That's why you have to have some really good advice when you get there, because you need to be educated. You can't have somebody just selling you a product. You have to have somebody that's educating you on the pros and cons of both, because there are. Just because it's inexpensive doesn't mean it's necessarily the right place to be. And I don't have a dog in the fight either way. But,
Sure.
So what Brian was talking about, and I think this is very, very important. We saw this back in 2008. I want to give you an example of this. A trick that investment funds play. Let's say back in 2008, you had $200,000 in your TSP, and as we know, and this isn't out of line at all. We saw this, the crash of '08 in the fall. People lost 30%, sometimes more, of their retirement funds. So that means after the dust settled, you were going into 2019 with $140,000. That's a pretty big hit. So what do? Do you go to a guaranteed G fund, or do you stay in there? Well, how much do you really need to get on a return to get back to 200,000? This is the trick. It's simple math, but I think psychologically we don't connect it. So, and I think investment firms do a good job of really hiding this. So the trick is that you would think, okay, lose 30, gain 30, I'm even. That's not the case. You actually have to generate a 43% return to get even. So now you got to take more risk just to break even. So if you lost 30% and you gain 30 back, you're only at 182. So you're still $18,000 short. So the point I'm making here is, are you taking too much risk? How much risk is enough? Where do you sit? When are you going to retire? I think the threshold's about 30%, because you start going down here to 40, you have to get 67 back. Now you're really in a risky situation. And there is a point where you're not going to be able to break even. There really is. So we always look at our plan as a straight line, but the reality of life is that it's a bunch of ups and downs, and you got to be prepared when you get to a peak on how to handle the valley again. And
we
you
almost
don't want to be in
inherently,
a situation.
well, I was going to say, Jeff, we almost inherently want it to be linear, like the top part
Yeah,
of that would be such a nice bike ride, that top bike ride, right?
here's my 8% every year, just right down the road, and there's the finish line. But the
That's what
reality
we're
of
taught.
life is that you don't want to be trying to get across the boat so you can get back up to the retirement threshold, only to have a rainstorm come in. So I just like this little visual
It's a great
because I think
cartoon.
it puts it in perspective. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on the Modernization Act, but Brian, you brought up a couple of the changes that are going on. One particular is the Roth versus traditional.
Yeah,
Um,
clients are taking advantage of the Roth nowadays. It's just terrific, because I mean, remember how hungry our government is getting when we look at the debt clock. One of the
right,
ways they can try to recoup that is through taxes. One of the challenges we have is that our traditional IRAs or our traditional TSP traditional is fully exposed to taxes when we pull the money out. So most of the folks on the webinar today probably recognize, the role Roth plays. With a Roth account, we can push money in after tax, and it won't be taxed when we take it out. That's becoming more and more valuable to folks to
right.
start to contribute to that. And we can talk about it, if the folks on the line decide to do that, we can talk about, if they're currently do it, if they should do it. But the fact that it's an option is just excellent. It should be considered without
Yeah, I
question.
think less than 10% of federal employees are actually contributing to the
That's
Roth,
the
which I think,
numbers.
yeah, I mean, I think it's just a matter of educating each of you out there on why this option should be considered. And that's part of that assessment process.
Yep.
So a quick little test that we'll send you, something else you can fill out on the survey at the end. If you want, just check this box for your 3-minute risk test. And what this is we can send it to you in an app, and you can download it on your mobile device or email it to you. But essentially, it's just a starting point to kind of see where you're at risk-wise. So you plug in, you push retirement, and then it's going to pull up a chart to see, okay, how much risk would you take on, let's say, $500,000 if you knew that you potentially could have a certain gain. So in this case, would you lose 14 to gain 14? And then over the next 6 months, it just gives you your original choice, more reward, even more with more risk. And it's pretty cool because it gives you a number. Now, this isn't exact science, and it's not meant to be um, a true planning mechanism. What it does is it just allows you to kind of start thinking, okay, where am I at? So if you feel like, okay, I'd risk 14% of my TSP to get a 21% return, the algorithm's going to give you a risk number. And then what we can do is we can compare it to how you're set up in your TSP. Maybe you have an old 401k, maybe your spouse has a 401k, and see if you're set up correctly. In this example, they're taking too much risk for what psychologically, at least in this test, they should be taking. So it's a good way to be proactive instead of looking back going, wow, I just lost 30% again, and I should have seen that coming.
Sure.
So check that box at the end, and we'll send you the link. So find out your risk number. And then as we start to wrap up here, I want to make it clear. I think this is the most important one. Okay, who are you getting your retirement advice from? Now here's 6 critical questions that you need to ask a planner such as Brian. Are they a fiduciary? How do they get paid? What are their background? What are their licenses? What's their education? Are they holistic in their planning? Do they help with taxes? What other services do they provide? So, I've teed you up, Brian, but
Sure. And
what
just like
would
the
you
other,
say, yeah, what would you say separates your firm and your practice from all the other choices these employees could be making on who they should be going to for their retirement planning?
yeah, and these 6 questions are terrific. So knowing that, in my practice, I've operated under the fiduciary standard pretty much since I was in the business, of course, but I got my Series 65, which requires it 2 years after I got into the industry. And then, of course, over the last few years, it's become a very hot topic and actually has put the big companies and the broker dealers under a lot of pressure because they don't always operate under a fiduciary standard. So being an independent advisor not being under the thumb of, what a big broker dealer tells me that I have to offer my clients and what I can't offer my clients
Right.
really separates, me and my firm from a majority of the crowd. And then, get paid good work to do good work for clients. So very transparent with how my practice is fee based. And clients understand where compensation comes from before they make any moves with me. And it all starts with just a good conversation and laying everything out then. And having professional credentials, especially in the retirement income planning space, and helping people with, I have a designee in the retirement income planning space from the American College. I'll continue to get Social Security type education. Those credentials just continue to add to the expertise I bring to the table. And no recommendations occur, Jeff, unless we know the bigger picture.
Right.
And I have that experience with the government employees. I understand how taxes affect retirement. We talked a lot about that today. I'm not a CPA, but we work very closely with clients on, understanding how their distributions affect them from a tax perspective and with their CPAs. So it's the bigger picture that, and most importantly, that retirement income planning and the retirement income mapping that I can do with clients, that's kind of falls under the other services that really offers them clarity.
Well, and it's very important in this day and age. And here's why. And maybe some of you that are joining us today have heard about this or read about it, but fraud charges were filed in July of 2017 in the Atlanta market against brokers being quote unquote financial advisors, right? Four of them were targeting federal employees' retirement accounts, the TSP. Now the SEC came in. These guys are gone. I don't know what happened to three of them. I know one of them is actually out of the country. He's now an organic farmer in Colombia. But before this went down, $40 million of TSP funds were moved. And I'm going to go back. I'm not saying keeping your money in the TSP or moving it is good or bad. All right. I want to make that clear. But what these guys did is they did not disclose the commissions on the variable annuities that they put the 40 million in. Okay. Number one. And number two, they said that they were endorsed by the government.
Just
Now,
silliness.
Brian and I read that and we're going like, that's just idiotic. But the point is that they were smooth operators, and now you got 200 some employees that are having to deal with this stress on hard-earned money that they had saved. So you got to be very careful on who you're dealing with. You can't go down this road alone, all right? But you need to have somebody that's ethical, that has your best interests at heart, and that's a big part of what we do and why we do it is to help make sure that you minimize those types of mistakes. So, with that being said, a benefit assessment is something that you should do that includes the TSP, pension, Social Security, spouse's information. As Brian said, put it all on one snapshot. Here's an example of some of the output of the assessment that we would offer. And Brian does this initially at no cost. It's part of the services and part of the relationship we have. So it's a way for you to get an initial track to run on. And then if you want to enter into the planning, Brian will put his planner hat on, but initially there's no cost to go through this assessment. Now, before we close, I want to bring this up briefly, but you may be on here going, I don't even have $500 in my savings account. I need help. I don't know where to start. We want to be holistic, and Brian's a planner. He's going to help with retirement, but you got to get in a position where he can help you first. 63% of Americans are broke. They don't even have $500 for emergencies. Okay. This is not good. So we partnered with a company called Best Money Moves. If you go to our website, Fed Resource, you can find out more information. But essentially, this is a financial wellness firm that is virtual, that you can actually get a portal and account set up that will allow you to determine where your financial stress is. It's really a cool tool that we offer employees that might be trying to determine, am I way over my head in debt? My credit's not good. I'm just trying to figure out a budget, the day-to-day stresses of life, right? And so if you're a benefit officer or HR specialist, we'd love to have a conversation with how you could implement this wellness tool in your agency. This company's out of Chicago, but they work with private and public sector all over the country. Just some great resources to help reduce stress of employees. Everybody knows less financially stressed employees translate to a happier, healthier workforce. And here's some examples of what that looks like. The first is you take a stress test to determine on your portal what compared to everybody else in the system where you're at on the stressometer. There's 14 categories. In addition, they're going to sort out a strategy for you on how to address each of these stress issues and give you a timeline. They also offer budgeting. And what I love is that they have a money coach that you can reach out to and talk to at no charge. It's going to help you walk through. And really, by having this coach, it's like going in to get a fitness trainer. Really, a lot of the same. A well-informed coach can actually increase your odds of reducing your stress. It's really a great tool. So you may say, I want to work with Bryan, but I'm not there yet. Okay. So our company's mission is to provide resources to you wherever you're at financially. And we think this is a really good one. So, all right, that wraps it up. Bryan, thank you. I appreciate your time. I know how busy you are. So great input today. So I
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Jeff. Yeah, thank you. I'm glad everybody was able to attend as well.
And if you want to receive a pension retirement analysis, Bryan would love to be able to deliver that with his firm. As I said, there's a brief survey. It's going to populate here. Take a couple minutes. Your feedback's very important to us on what we offer and how we do it. So this survey helps us. So if you're interested, you can receive that complimentary pension and retirement assessment. Let us know if you want us to send the risk test for your TSP and retirement, and also the stressometer. And if you have comments or questions, put it in the comment section at the end, and we'll address those questions one-on-one. So this concludes our presentation today. I want to thank everybody for attending, and we hope to be of service to you either today or in the future. And take care. This concludes our session.